The training arena aboard the Coalition Combat Academy was a cathedral of technology. Glowing walls of kinetic shields, suspended gravity rings, and the faint hum of plasma conduits beneath the floor. It was designed to forge unity among the galaxy's most promising warriors. But unity, as Commander Tivar was learning, did not come easily when one species didn't play by the rules. He paced before the lineup of alien cadets, dozens of species in perfect formation. Scaled Raxians, towering Drool, sleek Felari, each one standing at attention. And at the end of the row, a human, Cadet Mara Vance. She was smaller than most, her posture relaxed, her braid looped over one shoulder, a faint grin tugging her lips as though this was all mildly amusing. Tivar's voice echoed through the hall. Today's lesson, restraint. You will learn to control lethal instincts. No kill moves in class. Every cadet nodded in solemn agreement, all but Mara. She lifted her hand. Sir, clarification, she said, tone bright, almost curious. No kill moves unarmed or improvised? The words dropped like a plasma charge. Dozens of eyes turned toward her. The Felari blinked in confusion. The Drool let out a low growl of disbelief. Even Tivar froze, unsure whether he'd heard correctly. Cadet Vance, he said slowly, that means none. No lethal intent. No lethal tools. Her grin widened just a fraction. Got it. Discretion, then. Tivar's claws flexed. You will follow protocol. Of course, sir, she said cheerfully. When the simulation began, the cadets burst into motion. The air shimmered with low-gravity distortion as combat pairs engaged across the arena. Each species moved with predictable elegance. Measured strikes, defensive flows, perfectly rehearsed sequences. Then Mara moved. She didn't fight like the others. She flowed. One moment she ducked beneath a tail whip, the next she pivoted, sliding under a strike and using her opponent's momentum to send him sprawling. Her every move looked improvised, effortless, like she was dancing to music only she could hear. When her sparring partner lunged again, she caught his wrist, twisted, and used his own weight to flip him onto his back with a grunt. Before anyone could blink, she plucked a fallen training strap from the ground and looped it around his arm, pinning him effortlessly. The simulation AI flickered red. Unclassified maneuver detected. Result, incapacitation without weapon. The other cadets hesitated, whispering. None of them had seen anything like it. Mara released her partner, brushed imaginary dust from her sleeve, and smiled at Tivar. Improvised, she said simply. The commander's crest twitched. He'd taught soldiers for 2 decades, but nothing in his experience, no species, no doctrine, prepared him for the casual efficiency of a human who thought restraint meant creative limitation. When the simulation ended, silence fell over the arena. Tivar finally spoke, his voice low. Tomorrow, Cadet Vance, we test your limits. Mara met his gaze without flinching. With all due respect, sir, she said, her tone light, but her eyes deadly calm. You'll need better limits. The next morning, the training deck of the Aurelian Academy was unrecognizable. The soft light panels had dimmed, replaced by a cold, surgical glare. The air hummed with power. Energy barriers shimmered around a circular combat pit lined with hard light walls. Commander Thar stood at the observation rail, his scales rigid with anticipation. Today, he announced, voice like iron, we evaluate adaptability under simulated threat. All cadets will face the drone class appropriate to their combat rating. Then, his gaze fixed on the human. Except Cadet Vance. The others turned, murmuring. Mara was casually adjusting her gloves, expression unreadable. You, Thar continued, will face Unit D4. Gasps echoed. The D4 Dravik combat drone was a relic from the border wars, decommissioned after it proved too efficient at reducing living targets to ash. Its armor was plated with neutron-forged steel,
Its AI had no empathy protocols. "Sir," one cadet protested, "that unit's classified as lethal." "Precisely," Thar said. "We must see if the human's confidence holds." Mara stepped into the ring, expression steady. "Permission to clarify, sir." Thar's eyes narrowed. "Granted. Is the no-kill rule still active?" He hesitated. "Yes, within reason." Her grin returned. "Good enough." The drone powered up. 3 meters of steel and fury, eyes glowing cobalt. The arena trembled as it stepped forward, scanning her vitals. Threat level minimal. Mara's brow arched. "You'll regret that." The horn blared. The drone struck first, an arm like a hammer cutting through the air. Mara ducked under it, slid across the floor, and kicked at the knee joint. Sparks flew. She grabbed a fallen baton, twisted it in her grip, and jammed it between 2 armor plates. The drone reeled, countered, and fired a concussive pulse. She dove behind a wall, snatched a loose coolant line, and flicked it toward the floor. Liquid nitrogen mist burst across the arena. When the machine's foot stepped forward, the slick surface betrayed it. It stumbled. In a blur, Mara launched herself forward, climbed its back, and yanked the coolant tube upward, looping it around the sensory array like a garrote. One sharp pull, system failure. Core temperature critical. Shutdown initiated. The entire sim chamber fell silent as the drone slumped to the ground, smoke curling from its joints. Timer flashed red. 3.4 seconds. Mara hopped off, brushed frost from her sleeve, and said lightly, "Improvised." The silence stretched. Even the AI overseeing the exercise hesitated before declaring, "Combat ended. Winner, Human Cadet Vance." Thar descended into the pit, claws clicking against the steel. He stopped beside the smoking drone, his voice low. "You were supposed to demonstrate discipline, not destruction." Mara met his gaze evenly. "That was discipline. I didn't kill it." He stared at her for a long moment before muttering, "Stars help us if you ever decide to." Mara's smirk faded into something quieter. "Sir," she said, almost softly, "that's what my mother used to say." And as the drones reset and the lights dimmed, Thar realized something unnerving. Mara Vance wasn't reckless. She was trained. Trained for a kind of war the Coalition didn't even have words for.
3 days later, the Aurelian was en route to the Grelian Belt, a mineral-rich system along the Coalition's outer frontier. It was supposed to be a routine escort mission, a quiet test for the cadets before their first real deployment. No one expected the distress beacon. The alarm shattered the calm. Incoming transmission, civilian convoy under attack, multiple hostile signatures detected. Commander Tavar's crest flared. "All cadets to your stations. This is not a drill." The bridge erupted in motion. Alien recruits scrambled, half-trained hands shaking as they loaded weapons and sealed exosuits. The Academy's doctrines, the calm theory of combat, fell apart in the face of real fear. Only one cadet didn't panic. Mara Vance moved with quiet precision, sealing her helmet, voice calm over comms. "What are we dealing with?" "Unknown raiders. They're jamming Coalition signals." "Then we're blind." "Perfect," she said. When the Aurelian dropped out of warp, chaos greeted them. A convoy of cargo ships spun amid debris. Pirate vessels, sleek, jagged, unmarked, circled like predators. Before the cadets could react, energy bolts hammered their shields. "Return fire!" Tavar roared. The ship shook violently.
Two cadets froze, staring at their consoles. One screamed as a power conduit burst. Mara grabbed him, shoved him aside, and killed the surge with a bypass override. "Focus," she barked. "You panic, you die." Tavar turned sharply at her tone, commanding, measured. He didn't correct her. When the pirates began boarding, the real test began. Sirens blared, smoke filled the corridors. The first boarding pod tore through the outer hull and exploded open. The alien cadets scattered. The pirates were Dravic mercenaries, taller, armored, armed with plasma claws. Against them, the cadets' stun rifles looked like toys. Mara moved before orders came. She ripped open a conduit panel, exposing sparking power lines. "Cover me," she snapped to the nearest cadet. "I'm setting a trap." "You can't! That's improvised," she finished, twisting two wires together. The corridor filled with blue light. The first merc through the door hit the trip line. An arc flash detonated, dropping him instantly. More came. Mara ducked under a swing, grabbed a fallen pipe, and jammed it through an enemy's leg joint. She used the weapon like a spear, charging forward, each move brutal and efficient. Tavar arrived seconds later to find her standing amid a corridor of unconscious and smoking mercs. The cadets behind her stared, wide-eyed, trembling between awe and disbelief. "What is the meaning of this?" Tavar demanded, breathless. "Adaptation," she said simply. "They brought weapons, I brought imagination." Tavar looked at the debris, the sparking panels, the improvised tripwires, the pirates writhing on the floor, and understood something primal. The human hadn't just fought well. She had reshaped the battlefield. When the fighting ended, Mara sat against a bulkhead, bloodied but calm. "Next time," she said, exhaling, "maybe let the cadets bring kill moves." Tavar stared at her for a long moment before saying quietly, "Stars save us if they ever learn from you."
The Aurelian limped back to Coalition Command with hull scars and heroes aboard. The cadets were silent during re-entry, still trying to process what they'd seen. They'd trained for tactics, for symmetry, for balance. But the human had shown them something else entirely. Something raw, something terrifying, something real. When they landed, Mara Vance was summoned before the Coalition Council. It was a vast chamber of light and echo, filled with representatives from 50 species, some armored, some floating, some made of living crystal. At the center stood Commander Tavar, serving as witness and translator for the Council's human inquiry. Mara entered calmly, uniform scorched, braid slightly frayed, posture unbroken. "Cadet Vance," began Counselor Rethar, a tall insectoid whose voice buzzed like static, "you stand accused of violating combat doctrine, destroying property, and disobeying direct orders during a live engagement." Mara clasped her hands behind her back. "Yes, ma'am, I did all that." The chamber murmured. Rethar's antennae twitched. "And you admit this without defense?" "Not without reason." The insectoid tilted her head. "Explain." Mara stepped forward. Her voice was calm, but her eyes burned with quiet fire. "When the pirates boarded, doctrine failed. Formations collapsed. Communication lagged. Everyone froze. I didn't break rules to be reckless. I broke them to survive, and to make sure the others did too." "You jeopardized an entire mission," another counselor barked. "I saved it. If I'd waited for clearance, the ship would be ash. You can write all the manuals you want, but combat doesn't care about your protocols." A long silence followed. Tavar shifted slightly, his gaze fixed on her. There was pride in it now, hidden behind discipline, but unmistakable. Counselor Rethar leaned forward. "Tell us, human, where did you learn this kind of warfare?" Mara's expression softened. "Earth,"
she said simply. "Our planet taught us how to fight when the only weapon we had was a rock. Every generation since learned to make something out of nothing. Clubs, tools, strategies. We don't train for perfect fights. We train to adapt." The chamber stilled. Even the drones hovered in silence. Mara continued, voice steady. "You call it improvisation, we call it survival instinct. You think of limits, we think of possibilities. That's what makes us dangerous. That's what makes us human." Her words hung in the air like an explosion without sound. After a long moment, Tavar spoke quietly. "You asked me once what we'd test next, Cadet. I have my answer now." Mara glanced up. "Oh?" He nodded solemnly. "Next time, we train the galaxy to improvise." For the first time, the council didn't argue. They simply watched as Mara turned to leave, shoulders squared, every step echoing like a drumbeat of defiance. Outside, the cadets waited. The moment she appeared, whispers rippled through the ranks. The human had walked into the council's den and walked out untouched. Tavar's voice carried through the hall, amused but respectful. "Remember, cadets, no kill moves in class." Mara smirked over her shoulder. "Sure thing, Commander. Unarmed or improvised?"